Welcome to Shelf Talkers, a podcast from Village Well Books and Coffee in downtown Culver City.
So welcome to Shelf Talkers. It's the podcast from the Village Well Books and Coffee in Culver City. I'm Judith Martin-Straw, and I'm the publisher of local news site Culver City Crossroads. I'm also a bookseller here at the Village Well. So I'm with Sam.
Hi everybody. I'm today. I've worn a lot of hats here, but today I'm our in-house sports fanatic, and I am also a local cafe, I'm the loyal cafe and marketing staff member here. Yeah.
And we're here to talk to Mirin Fader about her fantastic book called Dream. So thanks for joining us, Mirin. We're glad you're here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Always here, always buying books.
We love that about you. It's a real strength. So
Thank you.
what is your shelf talker for Dream?
If you want to understand why modern NBA basketball is as diverse and international as it is, you need to read about the pioneer, Hakeem Olajuwon, who started it all.
All right. Yeah. So how would you describe in your own words, like the importance of Hakeem's legacy to the game? And, when you're talking about, quote unquote, greatest centers ever, or even greatest players ever, what do you, as a sports journalist, consider essential to that debate, that conversation?
I feel like Hakeem is unfortunately left out of top center debates. He's the most, he's the most underappreciated, I would say criminally underappreciated center of all time.
It's too humble.
Oh my,
This book.
right. Just a little bump. Yeah. He is one of the best centers of our time. He doesn't get a lot of credit because he's very quiet. He's very modest. He hasn't gone into broadcasting like his peers. So I think he's just less visible. And, younger generations don't, unfortunately, they don't study history as much. But he was amazing. First of all, he was the first true international superstar. He was born in Lagos, Nigeria, and he starts playing really by accident at age 17. He really didn't even like basketball. He wanted to play handball. Somehow makes his way to the States, and in 3 years, he's one of the top players in college basketball. Then goes on to the Houston Rockets, wins 2 championships. But, what made him more than a basketball player, he was really a hero and an icon, not just to Nigerian players and international players, which he, of course, inspired their growth, but to Muslims all over the world. Hakeem grew up in the Islamic faith, and then he abandoned it for about 10 years. And this book really chronicles his return to it and how it fueled his game, and how he had just legendary performances fasting during Ramadan and dropping 40 points. So, what he means to different Muslim communities, not just in Houston, but all over the world, is made them feel seen, understood. It was such a source of pride. It still is. So yeah, he just means a lot to a lot of different people.
I'm really curious how you got called in. This is your second sports biography.
Yes.
And how you got called into creating these really lovely, rich, full lives of these sports figures, when a lot of what we get for sports is really short little bites. So tell me what drew you down that path?
Yeah, I think I'm still kind of fighting for that long form to stay alive. I used to play basketball my whole life. I love playing basketball. That was my first passion. And, I played a year in college. And when that, didn't work out for me where I wanted it to, as far as playing professionally, I was like, how can I stay in sports, in basketball? And I was like, sports writing. And I think playing and understanding so much of what athletes go through and, what their journeys are like and the adversity along the way, it's just given me such an appreciation for the introspection, I think, required of doing something like this, where you have to perform and fail in public. And so I think I take that approach into my books and, really want to explore the person as much as the athlete.
Awesome. I mean, kind of on this theme, I mean, your profiles are second to none in terms of how thorough you are and meticulous you are. And, this last book, you did over 250 interviews, which is insane, the amount of dedication to just one person, one story. You don't see that in the media a whole lot nowadays. So, why, in your own words, why is it important to tell the full story? And where does your passion for covering athletes in this way, come from? You kind of touched upon it a little bit. But.
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that. I think, it's funny. I saw an article today about how, sports journalism is dead because there's no access anymore. And I just thought to myself, you could call 20 people outside of the athlete and get stories and anecdotes. That's just straight up journalism. And so I think, to me, I love doing that. And that's the approach, because, that isn't a talent thing. That's not, like a gift. It's a work ethic thing. I think it's kind of like how I used to feel in basketball, being shorter. Like, defense was always my calling card because you could control your hustle. I think calling over 200 people is really hustle.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And it comes down to like, yes, I am annoying. Hello, it's me again.
Yeah,
right, exactly. Exactly. So I'm like, I think we say, access is dead. Oh, athletes don't need sports writers. Well, when you interview a bunch of people, you get perspectives beyond the person, right? If they just do an Instagram post about how they're feeling, that's interesting. But, a coach who has been with them since the beginning, or a family member, or a person who even, was in charge of locking the gym door at night, probably saw them in a different light. And every single person has a different vantage point and angle. And I just think that's so important in writing, is to have different perspectives. And we lose that kind of rich diversity of story when it's just these like very polished influencer posts on Instagram.
Well, there's the old, poetic quote of the gift to give us to see ourselves as others see us.
Right.
And you can't know what the perspective is
right.
from the outside. I wonder
right.
what's of all the, and again, your meticulousness is just delicious. Of all the people you spoke to in regard to Hakeem, was there one person that really surprised you or delighted you with how they reflected on his life or his career?
I think in a sports book, of course, people want to say, okay, who'd you get? Who are the big names?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of big names in there that I got, Jerry West, Robert Parrish, like all these legends. But my favorite was actually a completely non-famous person. It was Henry de Iberando, who was kind of like the father figure of Hakeem in this book. And I loved that interview, not just because like he was so genuine and authentic, and it's this real story that nobody knows about of how Hakeem, begins this spiritual transformation and goes back to Islam and then becomes an NBA champion. But Henry is somebody that's like, one reporter just told me his name off the side, like, oh, it's a shame you can't interview Henry. He has Parkinson's. And I thought to myself, I need to see where Henry is, because this person, it was just kind of an offhand comment. Like, he was so instrumental and nobody knows about him. And so I guess being meticulous, I found
catching that little drop.
I found a phone number, and it was actually his son's phone number. White Pages actually gives you, family members' phone number. And I was like, hey, I'm just really interested in meeting your dad. Is that possible? And this son went about organizing this interview for months. And so if you're not meticulous, if you don't try every single avenue, you might miss out on like the most important person in the story.
Yeah, we both, Sam and I both had already talked about him. Like, we thought he was just a compelling.
Right.
He's one of the most important characters in the book.
Right.
He is.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just so much beyond sports. Like, I want to write about people. Yeah. And I think that in sports, there's this self-made narrative, like, I was in the gym shooting, I was better, I worked hard, I did everything. And it's like, ask any successful athlete who's at the top of their game. It was a village of people that helped them. And so I try to highlight community.
Absolutely. In this
takes
village
well.
I didn't even realize that.
Very, very apropos.
Did you know that we are the village people?
I
probably
do
am I
that.
sponsored? Yeah.
But I love that you brought that up, because as Judith was mentioning, we've talked about Henry as being this pivotal, person in this story, and also this idea of like, not only did Henry instill this passion or this interest in Islam, he also started to kind of give himself confidence, and there's this image that you paint a very poignant image of Hakeem's youth, especially this image of him being like so ashamed of his height that he's slouching through doorways or sitting in the chair in class, and he's slouching. And it was only after others encouraged him in this village, quote unquote, that he was able to take pride in himself. So I had a question, like, for you, like, is there anyone in your life that kind of helped you, like, unslouch your shoulders per se, like, give you confidence to kind of pursue this dream of yours?
It's so interesting, because as a basketball player, my whole life, I had the opposite problem as Hakeem. I was so small, and I needed people to tell me to stand tall and have confidence in myself. And that was so hard because throughout my entire career, it was like, you're not good enough, you're too small, you're too this, you're too that. And that really, it was such an uphill battle. And like my parents, my uncle, who I talk to every day, he's like a second dad to me, they were just always believing in me. Like if your child says, yeah, I want to play in the WNBA, and looking back now, I'm like amazed that they were like, all right, cool, we're going to do everything. And you happen to be 5 feet tall. Cool. We're going to help you do everything to reach that dream. Yeah. It's absurd, right? But they were always so encouraging of me to stand tall. And then when I had this second dream of being a sports writer, which is also not an easy thing to break into, they were like, cool, we support you. We'll do this. And so I just think having that support system is so crucial. And even now, like there's the same doubt, the same fears, the same stress, like they are always there still being like, no, you got this. And I think writers definitely tend to be hard on ourselves. And so it's good to have that.
So, and as a woman, in the field of sports writing, I'm wondering if there's, it's just such a nice frame to talk about Olajuwon as the beginning of this international, really opening doors, diversity, all this good stuff. Right. And of course, the WNBA is just rocketing ahead every year. It seems bigger and better and more well-funded and more sponsors and more attendance and, all of that. It's really getting a lot of ground. But as a woman writing sports, are there like doors that have not been opened for you, or places you've had to knock repeatedly and still not gotten in? Is there a something that you had wanted to do that they said, sorry, you're the wrong kind?
Yes. It's definitely it's still hard. I think early on in my career when I wasn't exactly sure if I was going to do like sports writing or sports broadcasting, like I quickly saw like I did not fit the sports broadcasting mold. Like they were looking for a very specific tall, thin, blonde. And I am not any of those. And it just, to me, I think women in sports are just so sexualized. There's very few women in sports that are actual writers. And so I do take pride in the fact that I'm, one of the few that are doing this part. I think most are thrust into like the sideline reporter role. Yeah. I think it's definitely hard. I think when I show up to a locker room, sometimes people will say like, are you the intern? Are you somebody's little sister? And my height like does not help. So I think that like I'm always underestimated, but again, it's like that same like basketball player in me that's just like, okay, I'm going to show you. And
also just being a younger person. I mean, you don't have that gravitas of, hey, I'm in charge here, walking in the door. Yeah.
But it's also let me like slip into places that maybe others don't. Like I've used it to my advantage. Like when I got sent to Lithuania to profile LaMelo Ball when he was playing over there, I just snuck in the gym and the security was like, who are you? And I told them and they didn't believe me that I was an American sports writer. So I got a front row seat to the story because they didn't think I was legit. Yeah. So, I've learned to like just make it a strength, but it's been really cool seeing the WNBA flourish because like my first internship was with the LA Sparks and back then it was like me and like 3 other reporters.
The room was empty.
And they were like, thank you for covering us, and so and I've covered women my entire career. And so it's just really, it's nice to see them get attention instead of it being seen as like, you're covering women. Oh, because I've definitely had editors say like, if you want to advance in your career, you need to stop covering women.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you brought up a good point about just, we were talking about kind of how Hakeem started this kind of like international revolution, and the last WNBA Finals MVP, Jonquel Jones, Bosnian and Bahamian, so like it's opening up avenues in men's sports and women's sports. So like just a little bit, just kind of your thoughts on like kind of that legacy in terms of what a sport kind of becoming globalized opens, like in terms of like the doors it opens for kids across the world, or men and women too.
Oh my gosh, it's just incredible. This book really focuses on the growth specifically in Africa. I think a lot of people tend to focus on the European growth of the game and all the European stars. And that's why I wanted to bring attention to this, and how there's like all these academies now being, built in Senegal, and how young kids that are, 5 years old, 6 years old can start playing, versus Hakeem Olajuwon started when he was 17 by accident.
Yes.
And so it's just a whole...
in a public park.
Right. It's a totally different system now. And it's really interesting. I did a story on basketball in India, and how, and the growth, and, they want to basically have like a Hakeem, what Hakeem was to Africa, or Yao Ming to China in India. They're like searching for, the NBA is searching for the next like Indian superstar. Yeah. And it's really amazing to see how globally these grassroots efforts, people, nameless, faceless people, spend last 20 years of their lives trying to produce a network that will produce a star that might not show up or come into fruition for another decade, but it will. And when it does, I think the NBA, and I don't, not sure as much WNBA, but certainly NBA is going to be like majority international league. Absolutely. The demographics we're just at a tipping point right now.
That's really intriguing.
Yeah.
That's really fascinating. Is there like an Indian equivalent of WNBA, or are women not? I don't know what the situation there is socially. Are they encouraged to play? Are they allowed to play?
Definitely. There's in this. So I was following one player when I did that story, and he ended up playing in the G League in America. But there's absolutely women's youth leagues there, and the boys and girls actually like play together. Right. And so it's this. They understand that it can't just be boys and men, which is a huge change. Same with basketball in Africa. There's so many great women's players that are international players that have gone back and helped in all of these clinics. There was just a women's basketball clinic in Dubai like a couple weeks ago that I saw on Instagram. Yeah, that I was like, wow. Whoa. And it was and it was like a whole contingent of amazing women's coaches and people from America going over there. So it's changing. I feel like we're witnessing change right now.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes, when you think you're of the amount of swimming upstream that you've had to do, think about those women.
Oh my God.
It's just off the charts.
It's just like the male player in India that I was covering. He was like, I didn't even have a phone. So I didn't know the NBA existed till I got the internet, and I went on YouTube and I saw LeBron James. And so like, I think about Hakeem, who like didn't know any of this existed either. And they just become these superstars. It's like, well, imagine if they're consuming and playing basketball and thinking about the sport when they're learning how to talk.
Well, one of the fun things about reading the book was the way that you describe Hakeem just kind of growing into the game as he was, settling in with Houston, and as he would, just the little pieces he would pick up, or that his size was so, everyone just assumed he was like this big wall. Right. But then he could shoot, he could move, he could, do all these other things. But it's almost like learning to dance, which is very hard to describe in prose. And you do just such an extraordinary job with the physicality and the kind of the magic and the grace of it.
Oh, thank you for saying that. I when I was doing this, I was joking that like there's literally not enough synonyms for shake. We're gonna spin, we're gonna turn, we're gonna shake, we're gonna shimmy. I'm like, what else is there? Because he's so like ballet in basketball, and so I was literally running out of ways to describe it. But I think that's so interesting too, is that like he was so different in every way. Like centers didn't move like that. They didn't have dance. They were big and bulky and slow and boring. And he's like, bright red in the sea of, boringness. I don't know if that's a word.
A sea of beige.
A sea of beige, and need more coffee. And and it was cool. It was a challenge to describe.
Yeah. So, I'm going off just this idea that Hakeem pioneered, this idea of being a positionless player, like you said, which now is pretty ubiquitous. Like if you want to be, a star, if you want to be the star, you have to be able to play every position. You have, the Doncic, the Jokic, you have Giannis, like these guys that are playing not according to their body type or the expectation or something like their role, they're going beyond that. And I feel like being a journalist, you have to do a lot of the same things. You have to wear a lot of hats. You have to, get uncomfortable. You have to, like you were saying, you kind of used your height sometimes. You've had to use white pages. You've had to like go back roads. So like just a little bit about, that, what is that like for you? How do you feel like you have to be kind of a positionless player to be a good journalist?
Oh my God. Yeah. That's so cool that you said that. I never thought of it like that, but you're so right. Like a lot of people, and I was this way too, when I was starting this, I really wanted to be a great writer. And then I understood it actually isn't about the writing, it's about the reporting. Like if you don't have the reporting, you cannot write these flowery things that you want to write.
All the good sentences in the world won't help you if
Come
you don't
on.
have the fact.
Come on. And so I was just like, wow, it really is about those details and like the hustle to get them, right? Like it's not enough to know that, Hakeem felt ashamed of his height. We need a bigger detail. Okay, he literally would slouch in class, or he went by the side of this tree and started crying, or it wasn't enough to say, oh, he liked jewelry. You had to know the specific company and things like that. And so I feel like it's almost like trying to be an investigator.
It is.
So much of what I do is just asking, not being afraid to ask a follow-up question that sounds stupid, like, I know this seems trivial, but what color was the car? And I think it's all about that. And whether that is like going to Houston a million times and just talking to people, or, the book that Henry and him read, I read it cover to cover. It's like you almost are you're trying to outwork everyone. You're trying to outwork to get the details and things like that. And that requires a lot of, being nimble and also creative. Like I went through the archives of his college newspaper. I went on eBay and got random media guides. Like there's just a lot of creativity. And again, I think it's like, I can control that, right? I cannot control talent, right? There's people, I always say there's people that are going to be better writers than me always. That's just how it goes. But you can try to work, your hardest.
Well, especially with a biography,
Right.
because everyone's life is just rich with detail. It's just overflowing with detail.
Right.
What is the salient detail? What is what's the connect points? Robert Caro, who's written amazing biographies on LBJ, I mean, he's the gold standard, talks about always open the next box.
Oh, I
always
love that.
open the last file, because you can't be finished until you're absolutely down to the cardboard.
Always make the extra call has been my motto forever, but I'm gonna steal that one because that is so good. Yeah. And it's also like having to learn that not every detail matters, but you got to get them all. Yeah. So like for as many that are in there, many are cut.
Sure.
And it's trying to say, okay, we can't have this be 600
like
pages.
Panning for gold.
Right. Like, yeah, exactly. Like what is the most gold? What is interesting, right? Some people who are diehard basketball fans, they want all the details on like the play. Some of my readers do not care anything about, the minutia of the play,
games,
the game. Yeah. And so it's like, it's trying to know that I will never satisfy both camps, but have enough details for each of them that they each feel seen, right? Mm-hmm. Like the basketball heads will get a kick out of like refs replaying his film so they can see if he's traveling or not. Mm-hmm. And then non-basketball fans will be like, wow, like I did not know he was playing during Ramadan. That's so interesting. I wonder how he physically was able to do that.
Right.
So I think it's just kind of like knowing that you have a different audiences in your work.
But that's by using that, you've created such a complete portrait of this unique man. I mean, it's compelling. It's really, really intriguing. Thank you. Very lovely. So
thank you. Yeah, like it's funny. People ask you to describe yourself in the industry and, what kind of work do you do? What do you like to do? And I always strive to be like the crossover between NPR and ESPN. Like I want...
That's a great line.
Yeah, like I want somebody's like grandma that doesn't know anything about basketball to be like, oh, that's interesting, Hakeem Olajuwon. And then somebody who's like, he shot 40% from the field, pulled down 200 rebounds in a season, to also be interested. But also you just know that like some people aren't going to like the human interest. They're strictly stats, and I can't satisfy everyone.
That's what box scores are for.
Right, right.
I was just going to say, for those people, there are books full of stats.
Come on, I know.
So we were really intrigued with the cover that you have on the book, and particularly the colors and how that reflects, a little bit of the team, but also that because of his faith, that having his picture on the cover was kind of a challenge for you to put together.
Yes, we thought deeply about this for many months. In the reporting of the book, we found out about, when the Houston Rockets offered him this bust of him outside of the Toyota Center, he refused because it was against his faith of idolatry concerns. And so he couldn't do anything that was like remotely close to being a bust of his face. And so a lot of times with biographies, it's literally a giant close up of their face on the cover. And so we were like, we cannot have that at all. At the same time, we didn't want the cover to be too basketball-y because I'm just inventing words all over this podcast. Because
That's my favorite one, yeah.
Right.
Basketball-ish.
Come on. And because the first book with Giannis, like the cover was so beautiful and he was looking up and it just sort of told you that this story's bigger than hoops. He's not in a jersey. It's about more than basketball. And so we wanted to recreate that vibe of like, yes, it's a sports book, but it's really not, in case you're feeling intimidated by sports. But at the same time, Hakeem Olajuwon is such a name of the past. We needed somehow to create nostalgia. And when you see the Houston jersey, you're like, oh, Hakeem Olajuwon, I remember him. He was amazing. Yeah. And so trying to satisfy all these different things with, of course, the number one concern, which is not wanting to do anything that would be offensive to him and his religion, we sort of have him off to the side. So he's not focal. He's not center. It's not zoomed in on his face. He's not even looking at the camera. I think it so goes with his personality of being, off to the side and not in the mix of things. And even the color is not Rockets red, it's burgundy, because it almost captures, like, this is a thing of the past. This is a time that you might remember, and it's almost like a blurred photo. It's really cool. I like it.
So one of the things we like to ask on Shelf Talkers is if there are 3 books that you would recommend to other people and say, oh, buy this book, you will enjoy it so much.
Wait, I love this. Every time I listen to the Ezra Klein podcast, I love that at the end, he's like, now we ask our guests 3 books. And I always wonder if they like prep it beforehand. Anyway, I did not know you guys were doing this. So this is exciting. Okay, we're going to go with my favorite book of all time, Toni Morrison, Beloved.
Oh.
Like, that book broke me.
Yeah.
I read it like 3 times. First time went way over my head. Had no idea what was happening. It was so difficult to understand and to grapple with. Second one was more for plot, like, okay, this is what's happening, here's this character. Third is like, God, that language is beautiful. And then other times I've read it is more about, like, obviously the meaning. I'm so inspired by Toni Morrison. I did my whole senior thesis on her. Like, her rhythmic, like, I strive to have that kind of rhythm and auditory quality in my work, and so would totally recommend that book. I love Sigrid Nunez. I think all of her books are good, but The Friend, I like it better than her more recent books, but I would recommend that because, like, the narrator is so interesting and you feel like you're just walking through the book with her.
Oh, cool.
It's just like a really breezy but interesting read. I would say Louise Erdrich is another one of my favorite writers. And I would recommend, there's so many books of hers that are good. I would recommend her earlier ones, like, that people don't know about, like Tracks, or La Rose is more recent. But The Sentence, I believe, was last year.
It was her most, yeah.
Yeah.
She's got one that just came out called
I just read Mighty Red.
Yeah.
But I like The Sentence better. If you love books, and you know what, this goes back to what we were talking about before. If you're, like, depressed about the world right now and you just want to dissociate, read The Sentence. It's like a love of books, and there's like a zillion literary references, and she's such a good writer, and there's like a mystery in it. So
and it's in a bookstore.
It's in a book. Like, it's just so meta. I love it.
Yeah,
I read it in like a day.
Yeah, I was like, how is the ink even dry here?
Oh my God.
It's just so fresh. It was absolutely 20 minutes ago. Yeah.
Also, like, these writers, they're so amazing. Like, Louise, oh man. So people are surprised that, like, most of what I read is fiction. I am inspired mostly by fiction. I would say most of what I read is fiction. Because you learn pacing, you learn setting, you learn character, you learn, wordplay more than you would in nonfiction.
And there's no, when you're a writer, there's no, you can't read anything
Right.
wrong. It's
Right.
all fuel.
Right.
It's all, inspiration.
Yeah.
So, yeah. No, and a good novel, absolutely, will put you there.
That's all I want to do now is just dissociate and read.
Go read.
And we'll throw in as a bonus fourth book suggestion. We'll throw in 4 and 5. Definitely Giannis, The Improbable Rise of an NBA MVP, which was also written by Mirin, and Dream, the brand new October release, The Life and Legacy of Hakeem Olajuwon. Definitely check that.
Well, thank you. Congratulations on your book, and thank you so much for coming to hang
you.
out with us. It was really a pleasure.
Oh my gosh, this was the best. Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
If you'd like more information from us, check out the show notes or send us an email at podcast@villagewell.com. You can always order the books mentioned in each episode through villagewell.com. This episode of Shelf Talkers is brought to you by Village Well Books and Coffee. It was produced and edited by Josh Stretton Carlson, and our theme music is from Noah Vickland. See you in 2 weeks, and keep reading.